Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. If you're here, you're probably interested in, like me, the impact of cell phone radiation on children. And we're going to be looking at children and cell phone radiation, a parent's guide to learn more.
Yeah, it's a big topic these days, and a lot of parents are worried about it.
For sure, so much information out there, hard to know what to believe, so let's, like you said, start with the basics. What even is cell phone radiation?
Well, cell phones, they give off this thing called radio frequency radiation, or RF radiation for short, and it's a kind of electromagnetic radiation.
Okay.
But, and this is important, it's non-ionizing. Okay, so it's different from that ionizing radiation you hear about, like X-rays.
Right.
That stuff, that ionizing radiation, that can like mess with your DNA, damage it directly.
Oh, wow.
RF radiation, it doesn't do that.
Okay, that's good to know.
But, and there's always a but, right?
Right.
Even though it doesn't directly damage DNA, there's still worry about, what happens if you're exposed to it for a long time, especially for kids.
Yeah, the guy definitely stresses that.
Oh, yeah.
Prolonged exposure, especially for kids, is a big concern.
Absolutely.
What is it about kids that makes them more vulnerable to this than adults?
Well, think about it. Children aren't just like small adults, right?
Right.
They're still growing. Their bodies are totally different, and they actually absorb radiation differently than we do.
Mm-hmm.
Like, take their skulls, for example. They're thinner than ours. So more of that radiation can get through to the brain, makes you think, huh.
Yeah, I never thought of it like that.
And get this. Did you know that because children's tissues have more water in them than adult tissues, they actually absorb more radiation too?
Oh, wow, really? I had no idea.
Yeah, so it's not just about how much time they spend on their phones. It's also about how their bodies are different and how they interact with that radiation.
That's a good point.
And then there's the time factor.
Mm-hmm.
Kids today, they're starting to use cell phones way younger than we ever did.
Oh.
So that means their lifetime exposure to this radiation, it could be so much higher than previous generations. It's a bit scary when you think about it.
Yeah, it is a little unsettling when you put it like that.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's time to dive into the risks now. What are the main concerns that scientists and researchers have about all of this?
Okay, so first of all, research is always ongoing, right? We're learning new things all the time. But there have been some studies that have, raised some red flags.
Okay.
There was this one study, it was published in Environmental Research.
Okay.
And they found that children who were exposed to RF radiation for a long time, they didn't do as well on those tests that measure your thinking abilities like memory and attention.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they actually saw changes in the patterns of brain activity. It's not just like, feeling a little spacey. They could actually measure it.
Wait, so there's actual evidence, like real measurable effects on kids' brains?
That's what they found. And it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Yeah. Okay, I'm officially concerned now. What else is there? What else should parents be aware of?
Well, there's the big one, cancer. I don't want to scare anyone, but the IRRC, that's the International Agency for Research on Cancer, they've labeled RF radiation as a possible human carcinogen.
Wow.
Some studies, and we need more research on this for sure, have shown a possible connection between using cell phones a lot and a higher risk of brain tumors.
That's serious. I mean, possible carcinogen, that's a big deal.
It is. And, some people say these concerns are overblown, and maybe they are, but I think we got to be cautious.
Yeah.
We can't just ignore the potential risks. It's all about finding that sweet spot between being careful and not freaking out.
Right, being reasonable.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got potential brain development impacts, we've got this cancer risk. Anything else that we should be thinking about?
Well, more and more research is coming out about how EMF radiation affects sleep. You've probably heard about the whole blue light thing, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a nightly battle in my house, getting the kids off their screens before bed.
Oh, tell me about it. But it's not just the blue light. It seems like EMF radiation itself might be messing with our sleep, too.
Really?
Yeah, it looks like it can interfere with how our bodies make melatonin, and melatonin is super important for regulating our sleep cycles.
And we all know what happens when kids don't get enough sleep.
Oh, yeah.
They turn into little monsters, grumpy, irritable, can't focus in school. It's a nightmare.
It's true. Sleep is so important for kids, and when their sleep gets messed up, it can have a huge impact on their whole day.
Okay, so we've got potential brain development issues, possible cancer risks, sleep disruptions. Anything else?
There's one more area that's getting attention, and that's the immune system. Some studies are suggesting that being exposed to EMF radiation all the time might actually weaken the immune system.
Really?
Yeah, and that could make kids more likely to get sick.
So on top of everything else, they might be getting sick more often because of their phones.
It's a possibility. We need more research to be sure, but
Sure.
it's definitely something to keep an eye on.
Wow, this is a lot to process.
I know, right?
No wonder parents are so concerned about all this.
Yeah, I get it.
But before we all, throw our phones in the ocean or something, let's talk solutions. What can we actually do about all this? I mean, the guide does have some tips for reducing exposure.
It does. It does. And the good news is, it's not about getting rid of cell phones completely. I mean, let's be real. That's just not going to happen.
But not in this day and age.
Right. But there are definitely things we can do to lower the risk. Be smart about it.
Okay, I like that. So what are some of those tips? What can parents start doing today to help protect their kids?
One of the simplest things, and it's really effective too, is just limiting screen time. I know, easier said than done, right?
Absolutely.
But it's so important, especially when we're talking about radiation exposure. Encourage your kids to only use their phones when they really need to, and set some clear limits on how much time they can spend on them each day.
I hear you. Believe me, every parent I know struggles with this whole screen time thing.
Oh, it's a constant battle. But even if you can cut down their screen time a little bit, it can make a difference.
Okay, so limiting screen time is a good place to start. What else can we do?
Well, another thing that's really easy to do, and it helps a lot, is having your kids use speaker mode or headphones when they're talking on the phone.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I do that all the time myself, actually.
Right. Keeps the phone away from their heads so they're not getting that direct radiation.
Exactly. So what about those wireless Bluetooth headphones? Are those okay?
Ah, that's a good question. And one I get a lot, actually. They're convenient and all, but they still emit a little bit of radiation. The guide recommends sticking to wired headphones if you can, or even better, air tube headsets.
Air tube headsets? What are those? I've never even heard of them.
They're kind of cool, actually. They have these hollow tubes that carry the sound to your ears, so you're not getting any radiation near your head.
Huh, interesting.
It might look a little funny, but hey, safety first, right?
Yeah, for sure. I'll have to check those out. Okay, so besides limiting screen time and using speaker mode or headphones, what else can we do to minimize their exposure, keep them safe?
Well, think about where they keep their phones too. Encourage them to carry them in a bag or a backpack instead of their pocket, and definitely not under their pillow when they sleep.
Oh gosh, under the pillow, that's asking for trouble.
I know, right?
But seriously, that's a good point. Out of sight, out of mind, and hopefully out of range of all those EM waves.
Exactly. And speaking of sleep, the guide recommends turning on airplane mode at night.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, that way you're turning off all the phone's wireless connections, so there's way less radiation while they sleep.
That makes sense. I mean, we don't always think about it, but our phones are always sending out signals even when we're not using them.
It's true. Those little exposures all add up over time.
So airplane mode at night is an easy way to cut down on that. So far, we've talked about limiting screen time, using speaker mode or headphones, keeping phones away from the body, especially at night, and using airplane mode while they're sleeping. What about all those EMF blocking products I see advertised? Do those actually work?
You mean like those cases and shields and stuff?
Yeah, exactly. Are they worth it?
To be honest, the research is still kind of mixed on those. There's not enough evidence to say for sure whether they really block all the EMF radiation. But some people swear by them. They feel better knowing they have that extra layer of protection, even if it's just for peace of mind.
I get that, especially when it comes to our kids. We want to do everything we can to protect them.
Absolutely.
The guide also talks about encouraging kids to text instead of call whenever possible.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
That makes sense. That way they're not holding the phone right up to their head for a long time.
Right. Texting definitely lowers their exposure compared to talking on the phone for hours.
Yeah, and it's probably a good habit to encourage anyway, especially for teenagers who love to chat.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Okay, so let's recap. We've got limiting screen time, using speaker mode or headphones, keeping phones away from the body, using airplane mode at night, maybe looking into those EMF blocking products, and encouraging texting over calling. Anything else we can do?
You know what people often forget? Turning off the Wi-Fi and mobile data on their phones at night.
Oh, I never thought of that.
It might seem like a little thing, but it really cuts down on the overall exposure when they don't need to be connected.
So it's not just about the phone itself, it's about all those signals it's sending and receiving all the time.
Exactly.
Learn something new every day.
It's not about being anti-technology or anything.
Right.
It's about using it wisely and making choices that keep us and our kids healthy,
I like that. It's about empowerment, not fear.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. The more we know about how technology affects us, the better choices we can make.
That's so true. This has been a really insightful deep dive so far.
Glad you're enjoying it.
But before we wrap up, I want to touch on something that really stuck with me from the guy. You know how it said that the research on all this is constantly changing? Like there are new discoveries being made all the time?
Oh, yeah. That's really important to remember. What we know today might be different tomorrow.
Exactly. So we can't just rely on what we've always heard or what we learned back in school.
Right.
We have to keep learning and stay open to new information as it comes out.
Absolutely.
Out of everything we've talked about today, what do you think is the most important thing for people to take away from all this?
I think the biggest thing is realizing that we're all part of this conversation about technology and how it affects our lives, And it's a conversation we need to keep having openly and honestly as technology keeps changing and evolving.
I love that. It's about staying engaged and informed and being willing to adapt as our understanding of these things changes.
Exactly. And that brings us to a really important question for all of you listening. What changes might you consider making in your own families in how you use cell phones based on what we've talked about today?
That's a great question. We've talked about limiting screen time, using speaker mode or headphones, keeping phones away from the body at night. There's a lot to think about.
There is. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about taking small steps and finding what works for your family.
I think that's a great message, progress over perfection. But before we go, I want to leave everyone with one final thought. What if the real problem here isn't just the radiation itself, but what it does to us, being connected all the time, especially for kids? Do you ever think about that?
That's a really interesting question. And I think it's something we should all be thinking about more, as technology keeps getting more and more powerful.
Right. Like this whole generation is growing up with a phone practically glued to their hand. And it makes you wonder what that's doing to them. Not just their bodies, but their minds, their social skills, everything.
Yeah, it's like we're running this huge experiment and we won't know the results for years, maybe decades. But
yeah,
we have to start thinking about these things now, before it's too late.
Absolutely. So to everyone listening, we've covered a lot in this deep dive, the science, the risks, especially for kids, and all those tips for staying safe. But what's it going to be for you? What are you going to take away from this conversation? What changes are you thinking about making in your own family, with phones and everything?
I really hope this has given you the information you need to make those choices. It's not about being scared or judging anyone. It's about being informed. And remember, it's a journey. Things are always changing. Technology keeps evolving. New research is coming out. So we have to stay curious, stay informed, and keep talking about it.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the world of cell phone radiation. We hope it's given you something to think about and encouraged you to make some healthy choices for yourselves and your kids. Until next time, stay curious, stay connected, but most importantly, stay healthy.